He touched the alien sword, and it chose him over their own kind. The battlefield was cold and silent now. Smoke still rose from broken ships and burning metal. Dead bodies, both human and alien, lay scattered across the dusty ground. The war had ended here, but the air still felt heavy with pain and loss. A lone human soldier, Captain Rion Blake, walked carefully through the ruins. His armor was scratched, his arm bleeding, but he was alive. He looked around, hoping to find survivors, but there was only silence, until he heard a weak cough from behind a crushed pillar. He rushed toward the sound. And there she was, an alien girl. Her purple skin was bruised, her armor cracked, and her left arm broken. She looked young, maybe his age, but her eyes were older. Full of sorrow, Rion knelt beside her, unsure if she was friend or foe. She didn't attack, didn't speak. Instead, she slowly reached behind her back and pulled out a sword. It was long, silver, and glowing faintly with blue energy. Ancient markings ran along the blade. Words Rion couldn't read. With trembling hands, she offered the sword to him. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she whispered, "This sword belonged to my father. Human, now it's yours." Rion froze, confused. "Why are you giving this to me?" he asked softly, but she just pushed it into his hands and looked away. As soon as he touched the sword, something strange happened. The sword hummed. Warm in his grip, it responded to him like it knew him. A soft blue light ran up his arms, making his wounds sting and then heal. He gasped and dropped the sword, but it floated in the air for a second before gently landing at his feet. "What is this?" he asked, staring at the blade, but the alien girl had closed her eyes, her breathing shallow. He picked up the sword again and quickly wrapped her in a blanket from his supply bag. He couldn't leave her here to die, enemy or not. An hour later, they were in a small shelter built from the wreckage. He gave her water and wrapped her wounds. She opened her eyes again and whispered, "My name is Virel, daughter of General Soccer." Rion had heard that name. General Soccer was one of the most feared alien commanders, but also respected, even by human enemies. He was a warrior of honor, and now his daughter sat injured in front of him. "Why me?" Rion asked again, holding the sword. Vera looked at him with pain in her voice. "My father? He believed in something more than this war," she said. "He saw something in your kind, something powerful and dangerous, but also full of hope." Rion didn't understand. He was just a soldier, not a hero, not a chosen one. But Virel continued. "He said the sword would glow only for the one who could carry his will." "And that's you," she whispered. "It chose you." Outside the shelter, the wind howled and dust blew across the wasteland. But inside, the sword glowed brighter, like it had found its purpose. Rion stared at it, feeling the weight not just in his hands, but in his chest. He had picked up a weapon, but somehow it felt more like a promise. "Is it magic?" he asked, trying to smile, but Virel shook her head slowly. "No, it's older than magic, older than your science. It's alive in its own way." He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time, not as an alien, not as an enemy, but as a girl who had lost everything and who had given him the last thing she had left, her father's sword. He felt something shift inside him. He didn't know what this sword meant yet, didn't know why it chose him or what it wanted from him. But he knew one thing: this wasn't over. Far in the distance, a red light blinked on a broken machine buried in the sand. Something had sensed the sword's activation, and it had begun to wake up. Rion had no idea, but by taking the sword, he had just started a war much bigger than the one he thought had ended. The night was quiet, but not peaceful. Captain Rion Blake sat near the broken heater inside the shelter. Watching the alien girl sleep, the strange sword lay beside him, glowing faintly with soft blue light. He hadn't closed his eyes since the moment she gave it to him. Every time he blinked, he saw her face again, her trembling hands, the sadness. In her voice, and those words, "Now it's yours." He had touched many weapons in his life, but this sword felt different. It hummed like it had a soul, like it was waiting for something. Or someone. He stared at the blade, then at his hands. He wasn't special. Just another soldier in a war that had taken everything from both sides, but the sword had chosen him. And that terrified him more than any alien weapon ever had. Suddenly, the sword buzzed sharply and pulsed with light. Rian jumped up, grabbing his rifle, his eyes scanning the shadows. Then, a low groan echoed from behind the metal wall. He stepped out of the shelter slowly, boots crunching the sand and ash. Behind the broken wing of a crashed shuttle, something moved, a tall figure, limping, dragging a spear along the ground, another alien warrior. But this one was different, his armor black, his eyes glowing red. He walked like a predator and stopped only when he saw the sword in Rian's hand. "You're not worthy of that blade, human," the warrior hissed. Rian raised his rifle but kept the sword tight in his grip. "I didn't ask for it," Rian said. "She gave it to me," the alien sneered, baring sharp teeth. That girl was a fool, and her father was weaker than legends say. Rian stepped forward, heartbeat rising. "Say that again," he said. Quietly, the sword sparked in his hand, like it had heard the insult. The alien laughed and lunged without warning. But before Rian could raise his rifle, the sword moved on its own. It swung in his hand with perfect timing, blocking the spear. With a metallic scream, Rian's eyes widened, and so did the enemy's. The alien took a step back. Shocked, "You're not trained." "And yet the blade listens to you." "I'm not trained in this," Rian admitted, breathing hard. "But I guess I don't have to be." The sword glowed brighter and pushed back against the enemy's weapon. For the next 10 seconds, the two clashed in the dust, metal meeting metal. But the sword was faster, lighter, smarter, and finally, with a sharp twist. It knocked the enemy's spear into the dirt. The alien backed away, panting, eyes full of disbelief. Then he growled, pressed a device on his wrist, and vanished into the night with a flash of red light. Rian lowered the sword, heart pounding. He hadn't fought like that before. Not ever. He looked at the blade again, confused and shaken. It felt like it had guided his arms, helped him survive. Behind him, the alien girl stirred and sat up slowly. She looked weak but alert, her eyes going straight to the sword. "You used it," she whispered. Rian nodded. Still trying to understand what had happened, he attacked. "Us," said I wasn't worthy. Virel didn't blink, just stared at him. "If the sword accepted you, it doesn't matter what others think," she said softly. "But now they'll come for you." "Who?" Rian asked, voice low. "Those who believe the sword belongs only to the bloodline," she said. "The royal guard, the old clans, the broken warlords, they'll all hunt you now." Rian looked away, eyes on the stars above the broken sky. "I didn't want this," he said. "I know," she replied. "But the sword wants you." He looked at her again, really looked. She wasn't just some warrior girl anymore. She was part of something bigger, something ancient, and now, so was he. Rian sat back down beside the sword, running his fingers over the glowing lines. He could feel it now, not just energy, but memory. Images flashed through his mind. Fast and blurry, battles he hadn't fought, faces he didn't know, and a voice deep and proud saying, "The sword chooses its future the next morning." Would not be safe. He knew that now. This wasn't just a gift, it was a message, and soon the whole galaxy would hear it. Asterisk. The wind carried dust across the ruined valley as the sun struggled to rise behind thick clouds. Rian stood on the ridge with the sword on his back. Watching shadows move below, the enemy was already awake. 3 dark shapes crouched near the old power station, and their eyes glowed like red coals in the dark. "They're not scouts," Virel said behind him, voice calm but sharp. "They're hunters." He didn't answer. He had seen hunters before, back on Earth, tracking soldiers like animals. But these were not human. And they weren't here for blood. They were here for the sword. Virel knelt and touched the sand, eyes narrowing. "There's more than 3. She whispered, "They move in circles, waiting for us to run." Rian clenched his jaw. "We're not running." He stepped back and checked his gear. 1 broken pulse rifle, a single flare, and a sword he still didn't understand. But something inside him had shifted since last night. He no longer felt like a guest in this world. He felt responsible. "They know who I am now," he said, "or what I carry." Vera looked up, serious and quiet. "They think you're a thief," she said. "But the sword says otherwise." Rian turned to her. "And what do you think?" She didn't blink. "I think if you die, everything dies with you." The sword suddenly glowed without warning. Its light stretched into the sand, forming small lines like veins. Symbols appeared in the dust, and both of them stepped back. "What is it doing?" Rian asked, confused. Virel's voice was low, full of awe. "It's calling," she said, "but I don't know to who." Down below, one of the hunters stood tall and raised a signal flare. A red line shot into the sky, crackling and loud. A moment later, a roar echoed from the mountains, deep and unnatural. Rian and Virel exchanged one quick glance, then ran. They moved fast through the rocky trail, dodging low branches and burnt trees. Behind them, the mountain shook. Something huge was coming. Virel shouted. They called the Boneclad. Rian had no idea what that meant, but when the ground cracked beside them and a massive armored beast crawled out, he understood. The creature was covered in thick plates of bone and metal, taller than a house. It screamed like a dying engine and charged at them without hesitation. Virel pulled him behind a stone wall as the beast slammed into it. Dust and rock exploded in every direction. Rian dropped his gun. It was useless. Only the sword mattered now. "Use it," Virel yelled, pointing. He pulled the blade free. And for a moment, the world slowed down. He saw the beast's eyes, cold, intelligent, full of hate. He stepped forward, gripped tight, and swung. The sword met the beast's side and cut through. Armor like paper, blue light burst out, and the monster screamed in pain. It backed away, confused, afraid. Rian felt something enter his body, like a wave of energy flowing backward from the blade. He didn't just cut, was like the sword, fed on the creature's weakness. Again. Virel shouted. Rian charged, faster this time, dodging a massive claw. He rolled beneath it and drove the sword deep into the creature's leg. It roared and collapsed, breaking the earth around them. The other hunters, watching from the ridge, began to retreat. They had seen enough. The beast tried to crawl away, but Rian stood over it, sword glowing bright. It looked at him, and in that moment, it wasn't just a monster. It was something ancient, something broken. The sword's light poured into its chest, and it finally fell still. Silence returned. Rian stood there, breathing hard. The ground was quiet again. He turned to Virel, who was already walking toward him. She didn't speak, just knelt beside the beast and whispered something in her own language. Then she stood and looked at Rian. "You just killed a legend," she said. Rian wiped sweat from his face. "I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter," she said. "Now they will know your name." Above them, the flare still burned in the sky, a message across the stars. The sword had chosen, and the galaxy had just heard its answer. Rian didn't sleep that night. Even though the creature was dead and the hunters had vanished, his hands would not stop shaking. The sword lay beside him on the stone floor, glowing with a calm light, but inside his chest, everything felt loud and confused. Virel sat across the cave from him. Her eyes closed, but her body alert. She didn't trust the silence either. Not after what the sword had done, not after what she saw in him. When morning came, the light outside was gray and heavy with fog. They didn't speak until Rian finally asked, "Why did that monster look at me like it knew me?" Virel opened her eyes slowly. "Because it did," she said. He stared at her, unsure if he heard her right. "That beast," she continued, "was created during the First War. The one your kind never knew about. The Sword War." Rian frowned. "Sword War." She nodded. "A time when blades held memory, not just metal, when warriors bled their souls into weapons." And the weapons remembered. He looked at the sword, uneasy. "And now it remembers me." "No," she whispered. "It remembers him, and it sees him in you." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small crystal device. It projected an image in the air, flickering and old. A warrior stood with the same sword in hand. Tall and proud, he was not human, but his face. Rian stepped back, jaw tightening. "He looks like me. He was Kelra's father," she said, "and my commander." Until he vanished, Rian didn't understand. How could he look like an alien king who died decades ago? Sword had chosen him, and that beast, the bone-clad, had feared him. Virel stood and pointed toward the far end of the cave. "There's something you need to see." He followed her through a narrow tunnel, lit by glowing stones in the walls. The path led them deeper, until the air turned cold and the walls changed metal. Not stone, old, ancient tech, untouched for years. They stepped into a chamber full of machines. In the center was a large platform, covered in dust and strange. Riding along the edges, she motioned for him to place the sword there. As soon as he did, the entire room came alive. Lights flashed, gears turned, and a deep hum filled the air. Then a beam scanned Rian from head to toe. A voice spoke low, slow, and layered. "Lineage match detected. Subject, echo of command." Initiating memory trial before Rian could react. The ground disappeared beneath him. He fell now, he floated. Colors and shapes spun around him like a dream, and then he was no longer himself. He stood in the middle of a battlefield. Sword in hand, alien warriors fought beside him. Machines fell from the sky. He shouted orders, his voice not his own, and Kelra's father stood beside him only. It was him, same face, same eyes, same scars. Rian blinked, and the vision shattered. He was back in the chamber, gasping, sweat dripping from his face. Virel was holding his arm, eyes wide with fear and awe. "You saw it," she whispered. "You were him." He dropped to one knee, confused and shaking. "No, I'm just a soldier." Virel knelt beside him, her voice soft. "The sword doesn't make mistakes." Behind them, the platform shifted, revealing a hidden vault. Inside, it was a box made of black metal and sealed with light. The sword in Rian's hand responded, unlocking it with a pulse of energy. Inside the box, another sword, but broken in two. Its surface was cracked, and its light was gone. Virel gasped. "The blade of judgment," she said. "The twin to the one you hold." Rian stared at it, unsure why his heart ached just looking at it. He felt something was missing, something important. The sword in his hand buzzed quietly, and somewhere deep inside him, he heard a voice whisper again, "Find her." He looked at Virel, confused, but she didn't have the answer either. The cave fell silent again, except for the hum of the sword, and the growing feeling that the past was not just history anymore. It was coming back, piece by piece, and it wanted him to finish what began long before he was born. Asterisk. The sky cracked open with green lightning as night fell faster than expected. Rian stood at the edge of a silent cliff, holding the sword in both hands. Below him was nothing but darkness, wide and endless. Behind him, the broken sword from the rood. The broken sword from the vault still hummed faintly, like a voice calling through sleep. He didn't speak. Virel didn't either. They both felt it. The change in the air, the pressure around them. Something was coming. Something older than war. Older than even her. People. They made camp inside the stone shelter that once held the twin blade. The fire flickered low, and Virel watched it without blinking. "I never believed the old tales," she said softly, "that both swords would awaken in the same age. But now, you hold one, and the other stirs again." Rian looked at his reflection in the sword's surface. It was still his face, but somehow not. He whispered, "Why me?" And this time, the sword answered, not with words, but with feeling. A warm pulse through his arm, then a flash of memory. A girl, smaller than Virel, with eyes like violet stars, handing over a scroll with shaking hands. Then the sound of screaming. Flames and betrayal. He blinked, gasped, and dropped the sword. Virel rushed to his side. "You saw her, didn't you?" she asked, voice tense. He nodded, confused and pale. "Who was she?" "She was the key," Virel said, her eyes heavy with sadness. "She disappeared after the fall of the last city, the one my people never speak of. They say she carried something no one else could truth." Rian stood slowly and looked toward the east. He didn't know why, but something inside him knew where to go. He pointed at the horizon. "She's there," he said. "I don't know how I know, but I do." Virel stared at him, then nodded. "If the sword shows you, we follow." They traveled for hours in silence, crossing dead rivers and shattered bridges. But just before dawn, the air shifted, the wind stopped, and the land felt. Rong Rian held up his hand, and Virel crouched, ready. Then they saw it. A shape kneeling in the middle of the road, wrapped in black cloth, motionless as they got closer. They realized it was not a statue, was alive. Rian stepped forward, sword ready. "Are you hurt?" he called. The figure didn't move. Virel narrowed her eyes. "Something is not right," she whispered. "Her energy is cold." Suddenly, the figure lifted its head, revealing a silver mask. "Return the sword," it said, voice metallic. And Flat Rian gripped the hilt tighter. "I can't do that." The figure stood, and the cloth fell away. She wasn't alien or human. She was something in between, with smooth skin like glass and eyes that held no emotion. "The sword does not belong to the broken bloodline," she said. "It must be returned to the vault of silence." Virel stepped in front of Rian. "That vault was destroyed centuries ago," she said. "Then the mistake must be erased." The figure replied, raising one hand. A wave of force hit them like a mountain, throwing them backward into the rocks. Rian hit the ground hard, the sword sliding from his grip. The figure walked slowly, each step cracking the ground. Rian groaned and reached for the sword, but before he touched it, the broken sword, the twin moved. It slid across the ground and struck his hand. As soon as he touched both blades, everything changed. A ring of blue light exploded around him, lifting him into the air. The broken sword mended itself before their eyes, pieces floating back into place. Both swords now burned with power, and Rian screamed, not in pain, but in pure energy. The figure paused, watching with something like fear. Then it turned and disappeared into mist, gone without a sound when Rian fell back to the ground. Both blades floated beside him. He didn't feel tired. He felt full, like something ancient had awakened inside him. Virel ran to him, her face a mix of wonder and fear. "You repaired the blade of judgment," she said. "No one has ever done that." Rian looked down at his hands, now marked with faint glowing lines. "What's happening to me?" Virel didn't answer right away. Then she said, "You're becoming what they tried to erase." And behind them, the sky cracked again. But this time, something stepped through. and it was looking directly at him. It began with silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels like the air is holding its breath. Rian stood frozen as the shape stepped through the broken sky. It looked like a man, but his face shimmered like glass. Ever shifting, ever changing. Virel grabbed his arm and whispered, "That's no warrior. That's a collector." Rian didn't know the name, but he didn't need to. The fear in Virel's voice said enough. The collector looked down at the swords in Rian's hands and tilted its head. "You should not exist," it said, in a voice that echoed like 10 people speaking at once. "I've been hearing that a lot," Rian replied, holding both swords tighter. The collector took a step forward, but didn't raise a weapon. "You think you've been chosen?" it said, "but you were made, constructed by a mistake in the old code." A glitch in the blood, Rian's heart pounded. "I'm not." "A glitch," he said. "Then prove it," the collector whispered, and disappeared into light. The sky folded itself shut, and the winds returned. But everything felt wrong. Virel fell to her knees, breathing hard. "They're watching now," she said. "All of them. The high rise, the dead kings, the hidden empires. We have to go back." She continued, "To the spire." Rian narrowed his eyes. "What's the spire?" "It's where the sword was born," she said, "and where it must return." They traveled through dead valleys and broken bridges, past burning clouds and forgotten cities. Rian grew quieter each day, not because he was tired, but because the swords had started whispering. They spoke in flashes, emotions, short words from long ago. He saw Kelra's father again, and again making a promise to someone unseen. He saw a girl with white hair crying over a broken gate. He saw himself, holding a sword that was not a weapon, but a key. Finally, they reached the spire. A giant black tower rising from the middle of a dead ocean. There were no guards, no defenses, just doors of stone. Virel stopped walking when she saw them. "I can't go in," she said softly. "Why not?" Rian asked. "Because if I do, I'll have to tell you the truth," she whispered. And then she stepped back into the shadows. Rian didn't follow. He pushed the doors open and walked into the tower alone. Inside, the walls were filled with carvings of battles, of faces, of stars exploding. And in the center an altar, like the one from before. He placed both swords on it. The ground shook and the walls opened. A figure stepped out from the shadows, wearing armor that looked exactly like his, but the face. It was Kelra's father. "I knew you would come," the image said. "You are me. And I am what you could become. I left a piece of myself inside the sword." Waiting for someone who could finish what I began, Rian stepped closer. Voice. "Lo, you started a war." "No," the voice said. "I ended one. And gave up everything to keep the truth hidden. But now, you've brought both swords together." The tower pulsed, and symbols lit up across the floor. A hidden gate began to rise from the ground. But suddenly Rian heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Virel stood there, eyes wet, but weapon drawn. "I'm sorry," she said. "They took my family." She pointed her blade at him, her hands shaking. "They said if I led you here, they'd let them live. I didn't mean to, but the swords lit up on their own." One flew to Rian. The other floated between them, blocking her path. Virel dropped to her knees, crying, "I didn't want this." Rian slowly walked forward and knelt beside her. "I know," he said. He took her hand and helped her up. "Then come with me." "But they'll kill everyone I love," she said. "Then we fight back," he whispered. Behind them, the gate finished opening, revealing a room filled with light, and far inside, standing in the center, was the girl from his visions, older now, pale, her eyes full of fire. She looked up slowly. "You finally came," she said, and the tower closed. Behind them, sealing the three of them in, the final path had begun, and there was no turning back now. Asterisk. She stood barefoot in the light, surrounded by floating stone and silent memory. Her eyes were calm, but her presence made the swords tremble. Rian didn't speak, neither did Virel. They both knew they were looking at the missing piece. The voice behind the sword's pain, "I am Elshara," she said quietly. "The one your dreams tried to remember." Rian stepped forward slowly, both swords pulsing at his sides. "I saw you," he said, "in the visions, in the fire." Elshara nodded. "Because you carry what he gave me." The walls of the chamber shifted, showing flickers of the past. Elshara, with Kelra's father, smiling, bleeding, promising. "You were in love with him," Rian whispered. "I still am," she said. But love was not enough to stop what came next. Virel stayed back, her heart heavy. She was watching. Something sacred unfolds. Something older than the war. Something that had waited centuries to speak again. Elshara looked at Rian now with eyes that burned. "You carry more than memory," she said. "You carry his choice." Suddenly, the chamber shook, the tower groaned, and a rift opened in the ceiling. Black machines poured through, gliding, crawling, whispering. The collectors had found them. Rian turned, the twin swords glowing so bright they lit the whole chamber. "You must finish it," Elshara said. "Touch both swords to the seal and make the choice." "What choice?" He shouted over the roar. "To erase the old bloodlines." She said, "Or bring them together through you, if you choose unity. You survive if you choose purity. I die and you become what he was." The sword in his left hand burned with calm blue light. The other cracked with red, like it still carried the old rage. Rian stepped toward the center, heart pounding. The machines broke through the chamber walls, aiming their weapons. Virel stood in front of him, her own blade raised. "I'll hold them off," she said. "You decide." Elshara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I am ready," she said. Rian looked at her, then at Virel, then at the swords. He saw his past, his lost world, all the battles he didn't choose. He saw Kelra's father not as a king, but as a man trying to save something fragile. He saw Elshara's tears, her patience, her eternal weight. He placed both swords into the glowing seal at the center. A storm of light exploded from the ground, freezing time. Everything stopped. Machines, the noise, even the falling dust. The seal responded to his heartbeat. And then, with a pulse that shook the planet, it made its final sound. One sword shattered into dust. The other melted into Rian's chest. He gasped, but didn't fall. Elshara stepped forward and touched his hand. "You chose unity," she whispered. "You became what we couldn't." The machines crumbled into ash. The rift above sealed shut. The chamber dimmed until only the three of them remained. Virel approached, slowly, unsure. Rian turned toward her, his eyes now glowing. With soft light, not human, not aliens, something new. Something whole. He held out his hand to her. "We can rebuild," he said. She took it, and this time, she whispered, "We do it together." Elshara looked toward the ceiling where stars peeked through. She smiled for the first time in centuries. Then, with a final breath, she turned into light and disappeared. Her last words echoed in the still air. "This sword belonged to my love, human, now it's yours, outside." The tower stood still and silent, but inside, a new fire had begun. A human and an alien walked forward, not as enemies, but as the first of a new story the galaxy had never heard before. And this time, no one would forget it.